This is Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, and you're listening to the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. There's a myth about being single as being a negative thing, when in fact, being single is an amazing opportunity to do fundamentally important growth work on yourself that helps you evolve into the kind of person you want to be and ultimately have the kind of relationships that you want to have. And that's what we're talking about on today's episode. We're listening to a super fun version of Billy Idol's Dancing with Myself. We're listening to the Dolly Rots cover, which I think is so cool. If you're interested to learn more about the Dolly Rots or their music or their upcoming tour dates or get your very own Dolly Rots t-shirt, you can do so at their Bandcamp page, thedollyrots.bandcamp.com. On this episode of the podcast, we're talking about something that I know is going to be so useful for you if you are a single person, recently out of a relationship, or even someone who's thinking about leaving a long-term relationship, and that is how to be genuinely happy being single. I work with so many people who are either not in a relationship or ambivalent about the one they're in, and they have a lot of anxiety about the idea of their, not having a partner. It keeps them up at night. And when they do date or think about dating, it can create a ton of pressure and anxiety around, are you my person? And the smallest things can become fraught because of this pressure. And so as someone who is absolutely devoted to helping people create really healthy relationship with others, one of the things that I have learned over the years is that it is fundamentally important for all of your relationships to first have a really, really good relationship with yourself. And that is the foundation. That is your primary relationship from which all other relationships are built. And to talk with us today about this idea and more, I have invited John Kim to join us today. John is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a life coach, and the best-selling author of the book, Being Single on Purpose, subtitled Redefine Everything, Find Yourself First. He blogs under the pseudonym The Angry Therapist, which I love and which we are going to be talking about at some point on today's show. And he has a new book coming out soon called It's Not Me, It's You. Exactly what everybody wants to hear. But that book is coming out in September, and it's all about breaking the blame cycle in your relationship. And that book is going to be a game changer. So I'm going to be asking about that as well. But John, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your wisdom and perspective with our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. And by the way, you are my first human interaction. This is the first human collision of the morning. So just warning, it could be great or it could go sideways.
That's all good. I am all about being authentic. I'm on my second cup of tea,
Yes,
so we'll see how it goes. My brain is still firing up as well. And
waking up as we go.
That's right. That's right. And also for our listeners, John and I both have some things going on. I have dump trucks all around my house right now. Mm-hmm. And John has parrots flying all around his house right now, which sounds really much more exciting and exotic. I imagine you like on a mountaintop somewhere in Hawaii. First of all, why do you have parrots flying around your house?
No, I wish I was in Hawaii. I live in Altadena, and it's a little patch up in the hills in Los Angeles. And the rumor was in the 70s, there was a pet store that caught on fire, and all the birds, fled, and then they started mating. So the big parrots that you see at the giant $400 parrots that talk, those parrots, they started mating, and so they're everywhere here, and it feels like Jurassic Park. And when we first bought the house, it was kind of exotic and kind of cool. It feels like you're away from the city. And then, since I do a lot of content and stuff and podcasting at home, now it's become like Birds, the movie, from Alfred Hitchcock. It just now become kind of crazy. Yeah.
Like they follow you, or like you walk out of your house and they're like sitting there looking at you.
Yeah, they're loud. They're like monkeys. They're just jolting, But anyway.
Well, that sounds really, really exciting. And well, yeah, I mean, in Colorado, the most exciting thing that happens is that raccoons get in through the cat door once in a while. So really, you are living the dream.
Yeah, I'd rather have parrots than raccoons. Raccoons are not nice.
Totally.
No.
Oh, anyway, so what I would love to talk more about, and maybe we could even start with this, is your book, Single on Purpose. So I was actually turned on to this book. A colleague of mine, another couples counselor here on the team at Growing Self, we were just in a conversation one day, and he was like, "I read this really cool book, Single on Purpose, and I hadn't heard of it before." And so I went and researched it, and loved your ideas. So I'm wondering if we could even start by you sharing with our listeners a little bit, not just about the punchline of this book, but like where did it come from? Like what made you want to write a book on this topic in particular? Tell us the story.
Sure. 10 years of working with singles, mostly women in their 30s who generally had a good life. They had a good job and solid friends, and they weren't unhappy except for the part that they were single. And because they were single, they just, they were grayed out. They were chasing. They were lined with desperation. And I thought to myself, man, how can I help? Because I'm not Cupid. I can't find them love. But what I could do is help them reframe what singlehood means. And as I started to think about this and really explore it, a lot of their frustrations and unhappiness came from programming, came from, the one and happily ever after. And if you find someone, then from there, life is going to be good, right? And it's like, it's all false and misleading, And so I said to myself, instead of finding someone else, what if you found you, or at least worked on yourself while you're looking for someone else? And I thought that, especially today with toxic swipe culture, that being single on purpose is actually interesting and is refreshing. And maybe we need to, like, maybe Barbie never needed Ken. She just needed that Corvette.
She definitely needed the Corvette. But that's such an empowering message. So you used a term a moment ago when you were talking about the people that you were working with, primarily single women in their 30s who didn't have a partner, and really were like making a lot of meaning around that myth of, if I was with somebody, then I would be happy. That sort of false logic, right? But you also used this term to describe them. You said grayed out. What did you mean by that?
Yes, it comes from my own story. One of my first books was called "I Used to Be a Miserable Fuck," and it was because it was a true story. And there it is, there in the corner. I was grayed out, meaning I was functioning. I was, able to get up and go to work and do my things, but I wasn't happy inside. I had a poor relationship with self, and I was just kind of going through the motions of life. And I think a lot of single people, it's not like they can't get off the couch, but they're just not thriving. They're not able to produce joy. They're not like living. They're just kind of grayed out,
Yeah. Like waiting
and chasing, instead of being super present and engaging and, making the best of what they have and where they're at.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. And so it sounds like you've definitely been on your own journey. And I think that's where the best books come from, to have that empathy of like having lived through it and really understanding. And it sounds like there's kind of that common thread there. It's like, feeling disconnected from yourself and sort of like wanting or needing something external to come in and like make you feel whole, air quotes, and just this realization that it's not about the stuff on the outside. It's about your relationship with yourself and focusing on that piece of it. Okay. So then maybe we could talk a little bit more about that idea, but I'd love to do it in the context of this passage. If it's okay with you, I'd like to read just an excerpt of your book for the benefit of our listeners. And then I'd like to talk about this and just how those ideas sort of fit. And I think this passage really captures that existential dread people feel about being alone. So you start by saying, take a deep breath and ask yourself the following question, preferably a few times. What if I never find a partner, essentially? And then you go on to say, did your heart stop? Maybe it did for a second if you really, embrace that idea. But despite what you may feel, you're still very much alive. I'm not saying you'll never find love. I'm saying this looming question you allow to follow you around like a dark cloud is what is stripping the vibrance out of your life. This giant what if you keep asking yourself is preventing you from truly living. Instead, you're waiting around for something to happen to you, and that waiting produces the feeling of loneliness. But it's actually not loneliness you're struggling with. At the core, it's the deep belief that you will always be alone. It's hopelessness. That is what's crippling. To turn on the lights and get rid of this heavy shadow, you must face this belief head on. How? Accept it fully.
Yeah.
I'm picturing in my mind right now several clients that I've worked with who are probably like just passed out and coming back into consciousness with this idea, because that's the hardest thing, is really like even getting close to that idea of acceptance. Tell us more.
Yeah, and it's telling how terrifying it is, and I mean that's kind of the point of that is I think because happy means running toward the picket fence and having the the 2.2 kids and the whatever the matching Priuses or this blueprint. The idea of being alone completely shatters that. The idea of being alone goes against what we were taught, and so yeah, it's terrifying, and I get it. But the thing is that if you don't actually accept and face that, then you're always going to be afraid. It's going to have power over you. The same thing about with people who are afraid. They're going to lose their houses, or people who are afraid they're going to, if they are in a relationship, that they're going to lose their partner, or their partner's going to cheat on them, or whatever fear you're struggling with. The acceptance of it makes it a shadow cast by your own hand. Right? You see that it's not actually. There's no monster under their bed. It doesn't mean I don't want to minimize the fear. I think the fear is okay. But to actually, confront it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To open the closet door and there actually
Yes.
is a monster
Yes.
standing there. And now we're
Yes.
going to have a conversation with it, as
Right.
opposed to,
And this doesn't mean that you are going to be alone, of course. It just means facing the idea or the possibility
Yeah.
head on.
Yeah. To take some of the power away.
Take the power away. Yeah, it's a mindset. It's not that you're not accepting and believing that you are going to be alone. That's not what's happening. There's billions of people in this world. You will not be alone. If you've been with someone before, if you have loved someone before, very high chance you're going to love someone again.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
But it's scary, though, in that moment. You know what this is actually reminding me of? And I think I have been hearing more and more about this idea in recent years, which I think is really positive, but is around the kind of health at any size movement. So body acceptance and not tying your worth as a person to what shape your body is or how much it weighs, that it's almost a irrelevant detail, and that you can have a beautiful and happy life no matter what. And you can be very healthy no matter what size pants you wear. And I think that that's just such a paradigm shift. I think especially for a lot of women who have been kind of acculturated to believe that the shape or size of a body carries a lot of meaning. I think I'm almost hearing a similarity in your kind of perspective on your relationship status, that it is actually not necessarily relevant or of primary importance when it comes to being a happy person and having a nice life.
Yes, we've never given singlehood a cape. Right? We believe that when you're single, you're defective. It's the same thing with divorce. Even today, where divorce is like at 60%, there's shame in it. Like if you say you're divorced, you feel like you're going to stamp defective on your head, or that you failed at your marriage, or and it's like no, it wasn't the right fit, or things didn't work out, or that relationship expired, And I think with singlehood, it's always been like, oh, you're single. Well, let me try to find you someone. you know, you never meet someone like if your friend's single, you never go up to them and say, "Oh, that's amazing. I wish I was single." You have so much, so many opportunities right now to go on adventures and do what you want to do. I'm excited that you're single. Instead, it's like, all right, who do I know that's single, and how can I hook you up? How can I solve your problem? You know?
Yeah, and that parallel again, if somebody, and I think again, it's getting better, but 40, 50, 60 pounds heavier than whatever
Yeah,
society says they should be.
yeah,
People feel absolutely that it's well within their right to talk about diet and exercise and,
sure.
make a big deal out of it if somebody has lost a few pounds. Similarly to
Yeah,
like if somebody has started dating somebody new, oh, we're going to celebrate this because this is what we think you should be doing. And
yeah,
this just whole paradigm shift around actually, no, you don't have to conform to whatever that standard is or that message is. But that it's hard though to break. Like it's okay. Let me ask you about this because it's hard. I think easy to hear and kind of
hmm,
intellectually understand. Yes, this all makes perfect sense. There are so many advantages and positive things to being single. I can absolutely be happy intellectually. But I think it's a harder shift for people like internally to change their own story and their own feelings about it, particularly if they're kind of fantasizing about feeling happier if they were in a relationship or they
yeah,
imagine that there would be like a lot of positive things on the other side of that. Do you have any thoughts about that? Or
yeah.
I don't know. And I know that's a big question. I mean, it's hard work to do that, but
I think the question isn't when I'm going to find someone. It's who do I want to be when I do, so it's not like the last time. So I think we put a lot of weight on the when, right? I also struggle with chasing things. And then so in my 20s and half of my 30s, the reason why I was so miserable was I would pause life. And then when I got these things, like, at the time I was a screenwriter. So when I got sold a script or got that 3-picture deal or got something that was in the future that I didn't have today, then I would be happy, right? When I got this thing, whether it was a beautiful woman or something in career or whatever, money, cars, then I would press play and life would be good. But until I got that, I would hit pause on life. And I think a lot of single people do that. It's like they're waiting for their person, and until that person comes, they hit pause. But what you should be doing is you should ask yourself, what can I bring to the table? What can I do working on myself so when I do find the person that deserves me, that I can create a new love experience, that the relationship will have legs and it will be different than the last time? Because if not, if I'm just waiting and I find someone, chances are what I'm bringing to the table is the past and all my, unhealthy patterns and, part of why the plane went down in the last one.
yeah. Oh, what fantastic advice. And I get that. It's like being so future focused that I
Yeah.
will be happy
Yeah.
and do all these things when. And
When,
I think what you're saying is to like really reframe that space in your life as this really incredible and important opportunity to be working on yourself in
yeah.
very deliberate ways so that you can be the kind of person who knows what they want and can be a great relationship partner for the right person.
Yes, and I want to also say working on yourself can mean so many different things. In my book, I say I found myself through donuts, barbells, and motorcycles, and so working on yourself doesn't, which is true. That's after my divorce. Like I was broke, had no money, had no friends, and I started with that. It doesn't mean it doesn't have to mean exotic vacations and expensive retreats and the commercialized version of working on yourself, right?
Well, if we could unpack that a little bit more, though,
Yeah.
I think that working on yourself, people can pick that up, but you're making a great point that that actually looks very, very different for
Yes.
many people, like,
Yeah.
and is worth sort of deconstructing. And so, let's say somebody is listening to us and thinking about, I don't have a partner. Here's an opportunity to work on myself. afraid of motorcycles and don't really enjoy exercising. And what was the other one? Donuts? I have a gluten allergy, right?
Oh, no.
So, and I know we're talking about specific things.
So that wouldn't work for you. That program wouldn't work for you.
I would work well for me. Well, except for the whole barbell thing. I only exercise if there's a really good reason. But so when it comes to though, like working on yourself, what does that mean from your perspective, right? Because we could have 3 months of singleness and do the same old thing we always do and not really grow from it. So in your work, when it comes to that key idea, if working on yourself is really, working on your relationship with yourself, what have you seen clients do, or what do you encourage them to do that moves them towards growth in that area?
Exploring your inner journey. So everything from thoughts to, what you like, to when we get into a relationship, a lot of our relationship with ourselves takes a back seat, And so when you're single, the soil is so rich for growth and connection to self. And so I spent a lot of time doing things by myself. I went to the movies by myself, went to the beach, did a lot of running, I got into CrossFit, rode my motorcycle, hugging canyons here in Los Angeles, a lot of journaling, which I use Tumblr, the blog, as a way to journal. But I did a lot of reflecting and a lot of exploring who I am, what I like, what I want, how I think, and the things that I want to change. It's great because it's the only relationship that you could actually have full control over changing, as opposed to friends and other relationships you can't really change.
Definitely. And no, that's such a great point. And I think that this idea is so fundamentally important because, again, particularly for people who have a lot of anxiety about being single, it's like something that they want to move away from and change as quickly as possible. And what you're saying is embrace it, like walk into that space and stay there to be reflective and journal and get to know yourself more authentically. And okay, this may be too personal of a question. Feel free if this is like too much, but I am
nothing super personal with me. I've been transparent for the last 12 years. I've swam too far to turn back. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, well, I strive for the same. So if there's anything you want to know about me, feel free. But during this experience, I'm just curious to know, like, with your personal experience of being single, what were some of the things that emerged for you over that time that maybe you didn't know before? And perhaps there are parallels to, work that you've seen your clients do during those same segments when they really allowed themselves to go into it. What are some of the things that come out of these spaces in your experience?
Yeah, for me, it was realizing how I function in relationships, what my shortcomings were, what my unhealthy patterns are, why I do what I do. So I tend to be more of an anxious attachment. So where that comes from, how that shows up, exploring love languages, what are going to be my new non-negotiables, what really matters to me in relationships as I grow. In my 20s, I was just high strung and very just wanting to have sex. And now in my 40s, of course, I want something different. It takes more than a breeze. I need eye contact and connection and similar passions and all that. So just kind of shaking your whole love Etch-a-Sketch and redefining what it is that you want today based on who you are.
Yeah, I love that.
So exploring all that, yeah.
Shaking the love Etch-a-Sketch, yeah.
And that's a journey, right? That's not a weekend. That's a journey. It's a process,
Definitely. Well, and there's also this piece because, you're a therapist, I'm a therapist. And so we can, I think, sort of know in some ways. I mean, I personally still benefit enormously from like talking to a coach, but know in some ways, what kinds of questions to ask ourselves, like what sort of questions I would ask a client in this moment, so can work through some of this with solitude or with journaling. But what you're also talking about are very real blind spots,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when it comes to patterns in relationships. I think that people have a tendency to be very other focused. Like, I choose the wrong people and do not have any awareness about how they are experienced by others. Is your general advice for civilians to like get in with a coach or a marriage and family therapist like yourself who can shine a light on some of those blind spots? Or have you had good experiences with people who are able to do this in sort of a self-help format, or maybe through your book, obviously, but like with journaling and introspection?
Yeah, I think therapy is amazing. I mean, I think because it's so hard to process by yourself, right? So having that other party, a neutral party to hold up a mirror, I think a lot of people mistake therapy as when you have an issue or a problem, right? And I think to use therapy as maintenance, to use therapy as a lifestyle, like us going to the gym or doing yoga or eating better. People don't do that. And I get therapy can be expensive and all that. So whatever you can afford, whether it's coaching therapy, stuff done through an app or whatever, there's so much available these days. I think it's prescribed. I think it's part of this whole thing. I don't think it's something that you just do by yourself with, alone.
Yeah. I just wanted to check in about that because I think it can be really hard. So I'm glad, you're talking about like finding a partner to do that work. And so you've been talking a lot about the importance of having that time alone to like understand yourself, uncover your own patterns. And also one of the big, premises of your book is the idea of building a relationship with yourself in a different way. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen that look like? So I think, you were talking about how partially that in the space of being single is a real opportunity to gain self-awareness. But when it comes to the day-to-day experience of having a different kind of relationship with oneself, I'm curious to know what that actually looks like in practice. I mean,
I think what comes up for me is learning to like yourself. I think it's harder to like yourself or someone. It's harder to do that than to love someone. I think love is a choice. And, we have family members that we don't really like, but we choose to love, right? And so I think your relationship with yourself is about exploration. So you could actually like yourself. I think many of us don't like who we are, and we push that aside and we don't work on it. So exploring, like any relationship, to learn what you like about yourself and then feeding it, growing it, nurturing it, and all of that. Usually, many of us, we lose ourselves in relationships. And that's why we seek relationships, because then we can hide. So when we're single, there's a lot of exposure. And that exposure, although uncomfortable, is good. And many of us, when we're single, we run, meaning we numb, meaning we, just go chase dopamine and, escape instead of sitting still and getting comfortable with who we are, learning to like ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. In my experience, I think the most awful thing for many people is this presence of this inner critic that lives with it, that is just so vicious and malevolent, and just, let me tell you all the reasons why you suck and everything that's wrong with you and why other people are better than you and just all this. And so I think what I'm hearing in there is that, learning how to manage that and really almost like protect yourself from that. And I think I've seen that too with like people who feel like they need to be in a relationship. And this is a working hypothesis, entirely unscientific, but it's like, I think when they're with someone, they almost feel protected from that.
Sure. That critic.
Like inner abusive.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And
like,
if you don't heal from, if you don't resolve, if you don't work on that, it's going to ripple into your relationships. And, all that comes from our story and, whatever, childhood, all of our experiences, right? Because we're all born just a fresh canvas. And then from there, things are written on it. So investigating that, exploring it, following the string down, seeing why we are like that, and then, building a new relationship with self.
Okay. So this is a lot of deep work and can be very vulnerable work. And so now I'm imagining somebody who's like embraced this idea and yes, I'm going to take this opportunity of being single to do some of this important work on myself and may still get comments or pressure or kind of, let me set you up with someone, kind of comments from others, or even either actually or internally experiencing like judgment from family and friends, like that cultural message, there's something wrong with you, you're single or that your relationships don't work out. How would you advise people to be able to tune out those external pressures, to give themselves permission to have that space? Because it's not just coming from inside them, it really is coming from like what your sister says or your coworkers. Like,
I like that saying that what people think about you has more to do with their story than yours. And so I think it's a practice, but getting to a place where a lot of judgment from friends and family probably have more to do with them, their insecurity, their blueprints. It's not something for you to carry anymore, you know?
and their values too. And that's actually a really good idea. Like if they've organized their lives around relationship, or a primary relationship, and that they could almost even feel uncomfortable or even threatened to be around single people who are having a fantastic time and unapologetically
I
too.
think also people with kids, after I have a daughter now, she's 2. After knowing how difficult it is, and of course, it's rewarding as well. But then seeing your friends who don't have children and almost being jealous of their freedom and yeah, projection and
Right.
stuff. Yeah.
Totally. Oh,
So then you say,
point.
well, when are you gonna have kids? Why don't because that's where happy lives, and you should have kids. You're getting older, and what the truth is, you're actually jealous that they have the freedom and you don't.
I know. People, I'm going to Paris for 2 weeks. Bye. And right. And you're sitting there in the playground. Okay. So now there's another thing that I do want to check in with you about. And I think that this can be particularly true for women, sometimes for men though, when it comes to that biological clock experience. And I mean, this is also very real for people. So somebody listening to this saying, okay, yes, noted, I need to take time between relationships to work on myself and be patient and accepting of the process. And I am 34 3/4, and I really know that I would like to have a family, and just feeling a lot of that like timeline kind of biological clock pressure. What about somebody who feels like they're running out of time and does not have time to spend 3 months journaling?
Yes, the feeling is real, but here's the thing. If you get into a relationship because you feel like there's a ticking clock or you're running out of time, you're going to compromise, and if you play that out and let's say you do have a child, do you want to have a child with someone that you picked because time was running out? Or do you want to have a child with someone, you may be older, but with someone that you could build something with, And I get, of course, biologically, women, they don't have. There is a ticking clock, and so that's again something to accept and wrestle with and sit with. I had my daughter at 47. I'm 49 now, and so I'm going to be the dad that picks her up from school, high school, and all her kids can say, "Hey, your grandpa's here." Although I'll be on a Harley, probably wearing Vans, but
that's right.
But I've accepted that, and I know that I'm a better dad now than if I had a child, say, in my 30s, where I was, I was very disconnected and miserable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's great advice, is to just slow down and understand the importance of it, that particularly to have a relationship that is going to be, producing children, that is very difficult. It has to be very strong. And so slow down, build it to last by working on yourself and not buying into that mythology about what people should be doing at which stage in their lives, because there are actually all kinds of options. Yeah. And then lastly, and I also want to talk about your new book that you have coming out too, but just a last thing on this topic. So the other takeaway that I've had from our conversation is that many people just feel driven by this anxiety when they're single. They feel like they're incomplete. They can't feel like they're happy until they are in a relationship. And it really kind of drives them into the seeking, as opposed to this stillness that is actually paradoxically the answer to creating the kind of relationship that you want. Do you think that people need to feel entirely whole when they're single? Or do you think that this idea of you have to feel whole and happy and love your life exactly as it is that just another trap for people to fall into?
Yeah, I don't like this idea that you have to be at a certain place to start dating. I mean, yeah, I think, like, for example, if you're an addict, I think, not using and working on your sobriety and stuff like that, of course. But I think you work on yourself forever. I think it's a lifestyle, right? And as you're doing that, when you find someone that you want to invest in, then you don't lose that opportunity with wherever you're at. I don't think you're like, okay, I got to check all the boxes. Is my body a certain shape? Have I read enough self-help books? Because
am I completely debt-free?
Am I debt-free? Can I buy a house now? Like, I think it is like having children in that no one's ever ready, but I think it's important that we start swimming there instead of just waiting. But there is no there. I think because when you get into a relationship, then there's more work, because now you're talking about another person and what they bring to the table and all the contrast and, all of that, which is actually what my new book is about, is once you do find a partner, then what,
Well, that's awesome. Well, and thank you though, just for saying that out loud, because I think that can also mess people up and feel like this other pressure. It's like, I have to have myself completely figured out. I need to be this perfectly perfect human that loves myself unconditionally and feels entirely whole before I can do X, Y, Z, all just these impossible standards. And I love what you said is that just swimming in the general direction of growth and health is good enough. We don't want to be stagnant and stuck. We don't want to wait, but to let go of this idea of perfection. And just thank you for saying that. Okay. And I really want to hear more about your new book and also the story of where this one is coming from. What's the motivation for this one?
It's funny. So I feel like there's like a trilogy or a bigger story here. I used to be a miserable fuck, and then I was single on purpose, and then now being in a relationship with a child, what that's like. So it definitely tracks my story. I've always wanted to write a relationship book, of course, as a therapist and relationship dating coach. And I thought, should I write it alone or should I actually write it with my partner, who's also a therapist? And then we could pull the curtain back and show the world that therapists also struggle in their own relationship and their own, and so this idea of humanizing the therapist was really interesting to me, a flag I've been waving for years. So I wrote it with my partner. So it's called It's Not Me, It's You. It's kind of the joke, but it's breaking the blame cycle and it's taking ownership. And we explore our own stories, client stories, and basically, how do you build a sustainable relationship now that you're not single? Which is actually, I think it's harder to be in a relationship than to be single, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because when you're single, there's this idea that if you find the right person, you're just going to fall in love and it'll be easy. And then you get there and you're like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
So take us into this idea. So you say that the blame cycle. What are you and your partner writing about there?
We go through so many concepts like how to fight without fighting, which is a whole, I could talk about that for hours.
Are we talking about the silent treatment? Because I'm like really good at that.
Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about. I think most people think fighting is bad. Fighting isn't bad as long as you fight in a healthy way. And if you don't know how to fight in a healthy way, that's, I think, sure, it's only a matter of time before the plane comes down, And so learning how to fight without fighting, that's a big piece, I think, in building a healthy relationship. Finding beauty in the contrast. I think we're used to, at least for me, it was always about lightning in the bottle, and then realizing later that that lightning can actually be dysfunction, right? And so,
wait, lightning in a bottle. What are we talking about right now?
Connection, chemistry, meeting someone.
Oh, yes,
that
for
whole thing is
sure.
like, that's what a lot of people are looking for, and that's great.
Yes.
But it could also be unhealthy. The lightning can also be dysfunction. And in my 20s, I thought, oh, if I don't feel that lightning, if we don't lock eyes across the room and know, then it's not love. And that's not true. So the relationship I'm in now, we've been together we're going on 5 years, and it was rocky in the beginning. It wasn't lightning in the bottle. It was a slow burn. It was peeling an onion instead of, biting into an apple. And I learning a lot about love, and that, healthy isn't just someone who knocks your knee-high socks off. I think love starts when things get hard, not when there's dopamine and, the person can't do anything wrong because it's new and you guys are exploring each other. That's exciting.
Oh, absolutely. Say more about that, though. What love starts when things get hard. I fully agree with this, but I'm curious to hear your.
Because things are going to get hard. Once you move in and you start to see things, you start to realize the person isn't perfect. The person realizes you're not perfect. And then there's a lot of differences. There's a lot of contrast, right? And then there's a lot of things that happen, like that annoy you, like the dirty socks on the floor or the way that he loads the dishwasher or whatever. There could be anger and resentment that starts to build up. So all of these things that we have to work on and take ownership, that's work. That's hard. That's something that has to be done for the relationship to have legs. And if you're not willing to do it, or you're not able to do it because you haven't done it in the past, it's going to go down. And that's why relationships are they hold up a mirror, and you decide if you want to look at self or blame the other person. And if you're used to just blaming, you're going to be single on purpose again.
Oh, no, definitely. Well, and that, it really, I think, ties into your work with being single and dating too, because I mean, just to follow that trajectory, somebody who is single, feeling a lot of pressure about being in a relationship. And I completely agree with you. I think people in that place often find a partner or make a lot of meaning from that, like lightning in a bottle experience, that chemistry, that excitement, which has nothing to do with whether or not that person will necessarily be a good life partner for you. But so, say that you've had somebody go into what is now a relationship from that place of maybe feeling incomplete, insecure, anxious, wanting to be someone. And now they have a partner, they have moved in, and the thrill is gone. And now they're with a person who is a mere mortal and just as much of a mixed bag as the rest of us. That can be very jarring for people.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at it from a dating mentality, that the logic is, well, I am with the wrong person. I chose the wrong person.
Yeah. And then people jump ship, and then that pattern keeps them not swimming past the breakers and actually being able to build something sustainable. That pattern keeps them in a cycle of the same type of relationship, and the only thing that changes is faces, right? So that's why people say, "Oh, I always date the same person." Well, because you're being the same person in the relationship.
Yeah, completely. So, what do you think is the big piece of growth for somebody who wants to stop that cycle and has met someone who is probably just as good and nice as anybody else, and is now faced with building a relationship that's based on that real love as opposed to the feelings? And what have you seen being like the biggest, or because it's not one thing, so this isn't a fair question, but the things maybe that they need to work on in themselves, work on accepting, embracing, getting comfortable with, that may be different than what they expected when they were single?
Yes, I think the biggest piece is, and the hardest piece is looking inward. Looking inward. This whole book is about stop blaming your partner. And I know our partners have things that is their fault, or that things that they need to be responsible for. But I think in general, we struggle with looking inward and taking ownership. And usually when you do that, and I know that's hard, the dynamic changes, right? Because if two people are blaming, the magnet flips, right? And nothing, so to build trust again, to, create rich soil, to build something healthy, both people have to be looking inward, because that produces evolution and relationship glue and legs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great advice. Well, and then lastly, I know we're coming to the end of our time, but I cannot let this conversation end without finding out why you write under the name The Angry Therapist. What's the story there?
When I was going through a divorce about, 12, 13 years ago, I started a blog on Tumblr back in the day when people were on dial-up. And I kind of did it for therapy. I didn't think anyone would read it. It was kind of like a digital journal for myself, start to document my story. And I just thought it was funny that a therapist was angry. But in looking back, I think it was my way of saying that I'm human. And so that started the first domino in messaging, which is therapists are human too, and they can't be angry. They have feelings. They're not perfect in relationships and all that. So, yeah.
Definitely.
I'm not angry anymore.
But it would be okay if you were.
Yeah,
but no, I get that. And I thank you for saying that too, because I think that, this idea that we, have things completely figured out is so not true. Like we're all fellow travelers on this journey of growth, and that it looks different for everybody. But I think also that probably adds so much to your work with your clients is, just the empathy that you have for the lived experience, and that they know that you understand what it feels like, because not just that you've been there, but you've also communicated it so beautifully, kind of helping them put feelings and words to their own experiences. It's great. So, John, is there anything else that you feel like would have been helpful or important for us to talk about today for the benefit of our listeners that maybe I haven't thought to ask you about?
There are so many things in the book to cover, but I think the message that we're leaving with, this idea of looking inward, and then love starts when it gets hard. I think that's enough. I don't think we, we just keep putting, because those are really big
It's a
things,
big idea.
Yeah. So maybe just adding punctuation to the end of that, putting a period there.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. And if people wanted to learn more about you and your work and check out your books, where should they go?
Just at The Angry Therapist on social. And then, the bio link will send them to all the places.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for having me.
What a fantastic interview. I'm so glad that you guys were here for that. And I hope it was helpful for you. And hey, if you are interested in diving into the personal growth process that my guest and I were talking about today, you are invited to cruise over to growingself.com, where we have so many more podcasts and resources to support you in this journey. Because you know what? You are worth it. Come over to growingself.com/blog-podcast, and you want to navigate to either the Love Collection or the Happiness Collection and help yourself to all of the articles and podcasts that we have in the personal growth section, the healthy relationships section, the emotional wellness section. We have articles and advice on personal growth, healthy relationships, and the things, most importantly, that we can all do to evolve into the kind of people we want to be, so that we can have the kinds of relationships that we want to have. There are curated podcast collections for you that I put together for you on Spotify on these topics, and certainly a whole other section on, if and when the time is right and no rush, on successful dating. If/when you're ready to get back into that ring, you'll also find a lot of articles and podcasts and advice on how to date with confidence and clarity. And when you are ready to put yourself back out there, if you're interested in being in a relationship at all, which you don't have to be, but if you do, we'll help you navigate that and ultimately find the relationship, find the person, find your person. So it's all there for you. I hope you check it out. And in the meantime, I'll be back in touch with you soon with another episode of the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. And in the meantime, please enjoy more of the Dolly Rots.